you, everybody, for tuning into another episode of the Keeping Karlsson Fantasy Hockey Podcast, the best fantasy hockey podcast in the world, hosted by two guys who own Eric Karlsson in their keeper pools at one time. I'm your host, Elon Dubrowski, and with me, as always, Brian Combe.
Hello, Elon. Hello, everybody. A huge show tonight coming up. We've got some outjuries, unexpected, some injuries that just happened tonight. We don't know if they're long-term yet, but we'll talk about it all very soon. Some hot and cold streaks as well. Some familiar names coming up on the show.
Yeah, I mean, we've got a big one, as always. So many outjuries. This is like a happy, there's been a lot of injuries over the past few episodes, so we're going to start this one with a whole slew of really big, impactful players coming back. And then, of course, we do have the injuries, like you said, unfortunately. Before we get into all of that, let's mention that we are presented by DobberHockey.com, the best fantasy hockey website out there. No question. Every day they have new articles up there. The daily ramblings, just talking about all of the important news that happened in the last day or so. They've got, line combinations, starting goalies. I'm looking, there's a nice, interesting article here right now by Kevin LeBlanc, Rookies at the Quarter Mark, Categorical Leaders. You could read all about different rookies and how they're ranking in the different categories. All good stuff all the time. I love DobberHockey.com.
So do I. Their ramblings is so valuable. Something that I do when I'm trying to figure out what's happening lately with a player. I'll go to their player profile on Frozen Pool, and it'll link to the last time they were rambled about in the most recent ramblings. How about this little tidbit? Chad Johnson, only one goalie has more wins than Chad Johnson this year so far, in the last month. Sorry, this month so far, and that is Sergei Bobrovsky. Who would have thought in the last month at any point during this year, Bobrovsky and Chad Johnson would be leading the league in goalie wins?
Yeah, well, Calgary is able to get wins. I think it's like in a large part due to Chad Johnson's play. And actually, I have Chad Johnson in here in the doc for someone we'll talk about a little later. I know we've talked about him every week, but maybe we'll just give him a quick shout out again, as always. But okay, let's move on to our first fantasy hockey headline of the week, which, like I've said, big name outjuries. Let's start with Jack Eichel. Back from his ankle injury in Buffalo. Huge return already. He had a goal and assist versus Ottawa, 2 goals versus the Rangers, nothing yesterday in a 2-1 loss to Boston, thanks to Tuukka Rask, another goalie who, by the way, has been so good this year. What a resurgence for Tuukka Rask. But we're talking about Jack Eichel here. Like, what point base can we expect from Jack Eichel for the rest of this season? Like I said, 4 points in 3 games so far. Last year, he had 56 points in 81 games in his rookie year. Am I crazy to expect closer to like a 70-point pace this year?
Yes, you are crazy to expect that. At least I think you are. And I get it. Like, it's super exciting. Everything going on in Buffalo right now, it's like at the start of the season when you have all that excitement going on around every player that you picked or you almost picked or that you had last year, and values are all wacky because of it. I think that's what's happening in Buffalo now that everybody is healthy. Finally, we've been waiting for it. If you do have a 70-point Eichel believer in your league, like, say, if Elon's in your league and he owns Eichel, time to open up trade talks with him right this minute. I think Eichel is probably 60 points is the more reasonable look. 70 points remains pretty whimsical to me. We had a lot of this chat on the most recent Patreon cast, Elon, about how Eichel is great as someone who can come back to a lineup and hopefully make a difference, especially fill out a top 6 that is one center short of being a real competitive top 6. But I don't know how much of a difference one guy who's not Crosby and who's not McDavid can make in a lineup. It does help that Kane and Reinhart, Eichel's line mates, have both scored. And to illustrate my point, Eichel's line mates, Kane and Reinhart, they've only scored once since his return, while Eichel has picked up 3 goals on 11 shots, which I know has contributed to a lot of this excitement around him. But, I'm glad he's back with some energy, ready to go. And I know the next question, Elon, is, because we've chatted about this, what do you think the impact is on Reinhart and Kane? Reinhart's on his most productive streak of the year. So congrats to those who had patience to wait until Eichel came back. Elon, I think you and I both didn't. I know I didn't. I can't remember what you did. He's a 45, 50-point guy before. Now, if you're hoping for significantly more, like, Elon, how much are you hoping for from Reinhart now?
Well, okay, I'm glad you're giving me the opportunity to respond here. First of all, I feel like you're really kind of like poo-pooing what I'm saying about Jack Eichel before we even get to Reinhardt, who, by the way, I did hold on to. I have him in 2 of my pools, and I very stubbornly refused to drop him. Dropped other hot, productive players to hold on to Reinhardt because I knew how much of an impact Jack Eichel would have, and he has. Like, why not? Like, why can't he be more than just like a 60-point guy? Like, he was a 60-point guy last year in his rookie year when he was new to the league. Now he's playing with like amazing line mates. Like, you throw Okposo onto that top power play who wasn't there before. Ristolainen is a year older, a year better. I don't know. I'm going to need a little more. Like, I need a reason. Like, why can't he make a jump in his second season with better line mates?
It's a huge jump. Like,
10
that's
points. Okay, so 65 points?
yeah, okay. If you want to compromise, I think that's the more reasonable stretch goal for Eichel. Like 56 to 60 points is still a big deal. Buffalo is not the most impressive team on the whole. I mean, you look at his line mates, is Kane and Reinhardt. And I know Reinhardt you have big hopes for going into the year. And Kane is a former 30-goal guy who takes a lot of shots. But neither of those guys tell me that there's a centerman playing with both of them that can hit 70 points unless he is someone like Crosby or McDavid.
Oh, all right, I guess we'll see. This will be something fun to watch. Okay, so you brought up Sam Reinhart. 10 points in 21 games without Jack Eichel. 4 points in 3 games since Eichel has returned. He is on a 4-game point streak. Like I said, I think that Reinhart could put up like a 60-point pace, but that obviously goes along with me thinking that Eichel could have a 70-point pace. So maybe you have to subtract 5 or so points from each of them if you want to be conservative like Brian. Evander Kane has points in all 3 games since Eichel has returned. So we called him a snoozer just a few weeks ago. He was doing nothing on his return. Like, I definitely don't think he's a snoozer anymore. I don't know if like he's a must add. He's not on the top power play. That top power play is O'Reilly, Eichel, Reinhart, Okposo, and Ristolainen. So Evander Kane is still like on the outside looking in there, but like you said, he's on the line with Reinhart and Eichel. So I think if he's available, you have to consider adding him now. And speaking of Rasmus Ristolainen, 3 points in 3 games since Eichel has returned. He's up to 12 points in 24 games now on the season. All assists, by the way. I see him as like a 50-point pace defenseman with Eichel back. I don't know. I guess you think that I'm giving too much credit to what Eichel can do to help all of these Sabres line mates.
I think you are. Evander Kane is a guy who we've been wanting to break out again forever. And I've been one of the guys who's always believed it until I think last year, where I finally said he's more like the Jeff Skinner in Carolina that takes a lot of shots but never scores on them, has an eternally low shooting percentage. Kane, he scored his first goal this year in his 13th game and has taken a big step back in getting shots on goal even. That's been a category that has alone justified his presence on rosters over the last couple of years. He's been averaging 4 per game over his first 100 games with Buffalo, but just more than 2 shots per game so far this season. That's without Eichel in the lineup. So now I wonder if Eichel shoots more or helps set up Kane for more. On top of that, Kane has a really low shooting percentage, even lower than we're used to expecting from him. So if he gets more shots and the shooting percentage regresses and he keeps playing with O'Reilly or Eichel, I expect his value should increase. Like, I think he's a 50-point guy, but it's still hard to jump right on him, having been a half-point per game guy for the last 2 years. And as we mentioned on the Patreon cast, he was actually worse with Eichel last year than he was without Eichel last year. His most productive centerman partner last year, Brian Gionta.
Okay, well, we'll see. I don't know. I think we're talking small sample sizes here. Evander Kane was injured also last year for a bit, so we'll see. I'm not saying he's a must-add. And okay, and I guess you wanted to say something about Ristolainen?
Yeah, so he had 41 points in 82 games last year. You're saying 55? I don't see a reason to...
I said 50-point pace moving forward.
Okay, well, you said, I think, in another conversation, I feel like you had him... Oh, wait. Okay, fine. So 50 points, that's 10-point up... No, sorry. Okay, so you say 50 points, that's like a 10-point upgrade over what he did last season. I don't know that I can get with that. I can get with 45 points, though. He's a nice shot-taking defenseman, but unsustainably high power play scoring at this point in the season. 10 power play points already puts him halfway to last year's total of 21 power play points. Interestingly, all 10 of those power play points have been assists. 8 of those assists have been secondary assists. So either they're working the power play through him, or it's just random noise when he's picking up points when he shouldn't exactly supposed to be. So I'm wondering, maybe he's someone... No, that's going too far. I was going to say maybe you can sell high on him, but maybe you can sell high on Eichel. Like I said at the start of this segment, Eichel, Reinhart, Kane, if you can find someone who thinks all of them are going to finish above 60 points, that's your next trade partner.
Okay. Well, okay. So we'll have to bring up these Sabres throughout. They're going to be my new like Chad Johnson and Cam Ward that I'm going to have to bring up every week as they keep producing and keep on. Oh, and Ricard Raquel, add him to the list that I'm going to keep mentioning until you either admit that you were wrong or it turns out I was wrong. Okay. By the way, Ristolainen is like the point man on the power play. So I don't think it's luck that he's getting these secondary assists. Like that's how power plays go. You give it to the guy at the point. He like passes it to someone who shoots and then someone hits in the rebound or he pass. Like it makes sense. He's going to get assists on most of these power play goals, primary or secondary.
Okay. He's on pace for 40 power play points.
Well, okay. I don't even want to throw out everything that's happened before Eichel was out. Like Sabres couldn't score. Now I think they can. We're going to have to get a bigger sample size with Eichel back in this roster with Okposo, don't forget, on this power play also. Like I think that I think it's a very nice looking top power play. I expect a lot of production to come out of it. Let's go to St. Louis now. Another big outree. Alex Steen back from his upper body injury. Huge return, right? 3 power play assists versus Tampa Bay, then a goal yesterday versus Winnipeg. So he's on fire after only having 10 points in 17 games before his injury. This was the guy that we were getting questions about, oh, should I drop Alex Steen? And now all of a sudden we're getting questions of like, should I drop Jaden Schwartz for Alex Steen? So, things have kind of flipped with him. Obviously, when you have such a hot return, it makes sense. My question now is if he is a free agent in your league, I guess we get questions from people in pretty shallow leagues where a guy like Alex Steen could be available. To me, I think he's a must add, right? Like, I'd be curious to know what point pace you expect for him. And like, if you're saying Eichel is like 60 points, does that mean that you would rather have Alex Steen than Jack Eichel this year?
So he's been either hot or cold all season long, Alex Steen. He's scored in streaks and not scored in slumps. You see either a string of games where he's put a point on the board or a string of games where he hasn't. Not a lot of consistency one way or the other from him. He's been a 65, 70-point player since that huge breakout in 2013, 2014. But now he's 32 years old. He's turning 33 later this year. He's missed 10 games or more in virtually each of the last 8 seasons. So there's a lot of mileage on that body, which is something that's starting to concern me at this age. I still like him for 60 points or at least close to it this year. Elon, interesting to note, and I think you've got it already to mention, is that he played center in the most recent game for the Blues.
Yeah, so this is how the lines have shaken out since Steen has returned. And keep in mind, these are the St. Louis Blues lines. They seem to change so often. They're the new... I don't even know who I should throw out the new Dallas Stars for how they keep shaking up these lines. So it's been last game, Fabry, Steen, and Tarasenko. Steen centering that line, and then Perron, Schwartz, and Stasny. Those were the top 2 lines. Laterra actually healthy scratched last game. So Yuri Laterra, we already called him a snoozer. Brian literally said he falls asleep when he hears people talking about Yuri Laterra. So yeah, definitely you don't want him. Top power play last game was Fabry, Perron, Steen, and Tarasenko. And then of course Shattenkirk, who's also been on fire, by the way. And then that means Jaden Schwartz was bumped to the second power play to play with like Berglund and Stasny and Parayko and Pietrangelo. So obviously a big downgrade there. So Brian, what do we say to these people who have been asking now, should I drop Jaden Schwartz for Alex Steen? I mean, if you look at the lines, I want the guy playing with Tarasenko and I want the guy playing on the power play with Tarasenko. So that would tell me that I would want Steen. But at the same time, I mean, Jaden Schwartz has been really... I kind of just want to say hold on to both of them and drop someone else, but some people just have like all all-stars on their team, and so it's really hard to tell them who they should drop. By the way, Jaden Schwartz, he's pointless in the 2 games since Steen's return, but he does have 3 and 6 shots on goal in those 2 games, so it's not as if he's not like there on the ice doing stuff.
You did say you want the guy who's playing with Tarasenko and the guy who's playing on the top power play. The thing is that guy changes fairly regularly. The Blues lines, I'm ready to finish speculating on them. We tried to at the first couple weeks of the year, see if we could figure out who's going where. Now Alex Steen is changing positions. Schwartz and Stasny also switching positions. These lines are just getting shuffled too frequently to try and project more than 3 or 4 games ahead who's going to be on what line and how you want them. So I think I would rank all the Blues forwards this way. I'd go Tarasenko, Steen, Schwartz, Stasny, Fabry, Perron, Laterra, and then be done with it because the lines are going to fluctuate all year long. I can't update that with every whimsical adjustment that Hitchcock and Yao make behind the bench. I think your job as a fantasy owner, if you own any of these guys or if they're free agents in your league, you need to you know that this is a team that switches lines often, so stay on top of that using Frozen Pool over at Dobber Hockey, and also know that if you get excited about a certain combination, it might not last very long. If you're looking, I don't know, to say try and acquire Robbie Fabry because he's playing with Tarasenko and on the top power play unit for a couple games.
Yeah, I would say, and in that ranking that you made, I think you could tier it. Like, you have Tarasenko above and beyond everybody. Tarasenko, by the way, we have to mention, he has 27 points in 25 games played so far this season. He's third in league scoring, tied for second in goals with 13, three back of Crosby and Laine. So Vladimir Tarasenko is like the real deal. Amazing, amazing. So yeah, you do want the guy playing with him. Right now it's Fabry. But like I was saying, so yeah, I would tier your rankings as like Tarasenko on top. Then you have Steen and Schwartz. They're together. You could probably switch them back and forth as the lines shake up. Then I'd put Stasny, Fabry, and Perron sort of in another group altogether. And then Laterra or Bori Laterra, as Michael said here in the chat room instead of Yori. Yeah, so but yeah, Stasny, Fabry, and Perron, you could probably switch around with them depending on where they are in the lineup. I agree. That's fair. Another guy I wanted to shout out, Kevin Shattenkirk. I guess I already mentioned him, but he has 19 points in 25 games played so far this season, which ties him for third in defenseman points with Shea Weber, just behind a couple guys you may have heard of them, Brent Burns and Erik Karlsson. He's also leading all D-men with 12 power play points. A lot of people were apprehensive about drafting Shattenkirk because they were so worried about Parayko potentially taking his job. It hasn't happened, okay? Like, Kevin Shattenkirk is so good. Like, Brian, we drafted him in our joint league. I wish I drafted him in other leagues because he's been so amazing. I did mention Parayko, though. And Brian, you did tell me earlier in the week, you were like, I want to talk about Parayko this week. So I'll give you the floor to mention him.
Yeah, he's been so good, even in a supplementary role, sort of. I mean, he's still in a top 4 role, but he's not about to usurp anything from Shattenkirk or even Pietrangelo right now. But he is top 10 in even strength offensive output in the entire NHL amongst defensemen. That's points per 60, top 10, shots on goal per 60, top 10. He's playing third fiddle on the power play, which is a real shame, but he's still one of 3 St. Louis Blue Liners who are in the top 20 for points per 60 minutes by defensemen on the power play. He also gets a couple blocks per game, occasionally has big hits games, and he looks ready to be a big-time producer if and when Shattenkirk and Pietrangelo move along. For now, he still sits 80th in the league amongst defensemen in ice time, which is a bit of a problem for being able to put up those counting stats, but everything he's doing is amazing right now.
Yeah, okay, so Colton Parayko, definitely in a keeper league, a lot of upside there. Brian, I was going to ask you if we should drop David Perron in our joint league because we added him when he was on that amazing 8-game point streak. He's now pointless in 2 games, like whatever, just 2 games. I was going to ask if we should maybe drop him for Fabry since he's playing with Tarasenko, but then now I've decided that I think I just want to pick up Michael Stone, who we'll get to a little bit later because we have more room for a defenseman. And did you know that Anthony DeAngelo has been sent down by Arizona? Breaking news. So all of a sudden, Michael Stone's value goes up. We'll get to that in a little bit. Let's keep going with the outjuries, though, as you wave your hand to me, being like, why are you even bringing up this boring stuff? This is what goes through my mind all day, Brian.
It's not boring. Everybody's going to know it when we get, it's in the plans. We have a roadmap here to follow. And you just get to spill the beans on all the cool things that we found out during the week.
Well, I don't know. Like, don't people on the radio do things like that? Like, coming up soon, we're going to talk about the latest from Arizona. But
first, Taylor Hall. How about that? My turn.
Wait, what? How am I going to edit this?
But first, Taylor Hall. My turn to jump ahead of you. Taylor Hall is next.
Are you going to do the intro for Taylor Hall?
No, you do the intro for Taylor Hall.
Huge news! Taylor Hall is back for the New Jersey Devils earlier than I expected. He had nothing in his return versus Chicago, but then a goal and 2 assists in yesterday's huge 5-4 comeback win versus Nashville. Brian, you have Pekka Rinne, and I'm sure you didn't enjoy how they let in 4 goals in the third period and overtime. Anyways, that brings Taylor Hall up to 15 points in 16 games. I assume you would have him above Eichel and Steen. I don't even know if you answered in the end who you'd rather have between Eichel and Steen, so maybe you could get to that in a second. But Hall's return nicely for Camilleri owners. It hasn't slowed down Mike Camilleri as we feared. We thought, oh, now he'll go back to playing in a secondary role. Like, no worry about that so far. He had 2 goals yesterday, 1 assist the game before. That puts Camilleri up to 6 goals and 5 assists in 6 games since coming back from his personal leave. 17 points in 18 games on the season now after doing nothing over the first month or so. So, like, Mike Camilleri, hopefully you added him when you had the chance. He's probably added in all leagues. Taylor Hall, he's amazing. There's nothing really to say about him except for just he's fantastic, and I'm going to guess that you're going to have him above the other guys we've mentioned so far, like Eichel and Steen. And, before I cut to you, guess who's leading the New Jersey Devils in points right now? It's actually not Hall or Camilleri. They've obviously both missed time. It's Travis Zajac. He has 20 points in 24 games played. I have to say that again. Travis Zajac, 20 points in 24 games played. He had a hat trick versus Chicago, 2 assists yesterday versus Nashville. He's been sticking with Camilleri and Palmieri, so not bad line mates. Hall actually was playing with Henrique and Parenteau in the last game, and Henrique and Parenteau still not really doing anything. Taylor Hall doesn't need them to get points, I guess. Maybe Adam Henrique is someone you guys should watch because he is centering Taylor Hall. But Brian, what can we also expect from Travis Zajac moving forward? He's a free agent in all of my leagues, and actually, I wrote this before he was actually added in one of my leagues. In 2 of my 3 leagues, he's a free agent. Should that not be the case?
It probably shouldn't be the case. First, let's go back to Taylor Hall. I'll just state the obvious, and then we'll move on to Zajac. He's better than Eichel. He's better than Steen. I think I'd have Eichel just a smidge ahead of Steen, although Steen's line mates will occasionally be better than Eichel's. I don't want to get back into that whole St. Louis prediction scenario. But back to New Jersey, Taylor Hall, underappreciated in fantasy. There are very few left wingers above him, and the ones that beneath him are in a different tier. It's like you've got Ben and Ovechkin at the top, and then you've got Hall and Forsberg next. I'm probably missing a couple guys off the top of my head, but essentially that's it. That's it. So he has a lot of value as a left winger who can do a lot of things that many left wingers can't come close to. Travis Zajac is doing things that Travis Zajac hasn't really been able to come close to over the course of his career. He just scored the 2nd hat trick of his career, and I'm back to really liking him now that he's making it work with Camilleri. Before, I was absolutely on board with him about Hall. Then Hall got injured, and I was nervous that it wasn't going to continue. It did while he was with Camilleri, and Zajac is also doing enough for himself, too. He's taking as many shots as he ever has over the past 6 years. There's actually this funny quirk in his numbers. The seasons in which he's shot the most, he's also had his highest shooting percentages. So apparently for him, more shots means better success when putting shots on goal. I think it's happened enough times that I think there might be something to it other than just random variance. I checked to see if him taking more shots means he's taking more from in close, and that's why his shooting percentage goes up. He's adding in close shots to that, but it actually looks like he's adding shots from further out to his shot totals instead. So maybe, I don't know, he's less hesitant to put pucks on net from anywhere, and that somehow is working in his favor percentage-wise. So that's great for him. Centermen are deep in lots of leagues, but Travis Zajac is still worth an ad if you're looking for a solid depth. Is still worth an ad if you're looking for a solid depth guy. And his success with Camilleri, Elon, you mentioned Adam Henrique. It could bode well for Henrique. If Zajac and Camilleri stick, and Henrique gets to stick with Hall, maybe eventually those two are going to click.
Sorry, the DJ Zhang is cracking me up a little bit in this chat room. Okay.
Oh my gosh.
All right, so I guess we could start our list of free agents or potential free agents today. We'll throw Travis Zajac there, and then as we mentioned other guys as the show goes on, I could compare him to other potential ads for people. But yeah, that's great for the Devils. It's too bad Corey Schneider is still kind of struggling because it seems like now they're finally a team that could score some goals. They have 2 decent-looking lines, so a nice top 6. If Schneider can, shore things up a little bit, which I'm sure he will. He's Corey Schneider. I'm not going to give up on him until he gives me like 2 bad seasons in a row, I feel like. So I see good things ahead potentially for New Jersey. Brian, okay, let's move on now. Let's go to Winnipeg. Oh, by the way, question in the chat room. Brian, I haven't shout out the chat room yet. I always mess this up. Okay, we are live right now on YouTube. You could join us every week if you're listening to this going like, I want to be in this chat room. You can watch us live. KeepItKarlsson.com/live every Sunday at 8 p.m. A lot of fun. Brian, one question here. What's on your shelf back there? A lot of people are curious.
Seriously, is this show fun? I have my response typed out. You know what? If you want to know what's on my shelf, you come join the live chat and you can ask me anytime.
Okay, I don't know. It just looks like a bunch of knickknacks. I was curious also.
It is
Okay.
okay. So I've got a couple picture frames. I've got a vase with some dried flowers and these two like I don't know wooden like log tree trunk but small decor things. I guess my wife bought them at some point and I don't know what they're actually for, but they make the room look a little nice and hopefully nice for everybody watching. Elon, what's behind you? What's on your shelf?
I've already talked about this before. This is my president's trophy I won one year. All right, let's move on to Winnipeg. Another nice outjury. Brian Little, all these people coming back. I think we had an episode like a month ago or something where there were a bunch of people coming back from injury and doing nothing, like when Evander Kane came back. But this episode is the complete opposite. So Brian Little, he's back from his lower body injury that he sustained in game 1 of the season. He had a goal and an assist yesterday versus St. Louis and a goal Thursday versus Edmonton. So he's up to 4 points in 4 games played on the season. He was playing on a line with Wheeler and Stafford, but then yesterday Mark Scheifele was held out with a lower body injury, and it looks like Scheifele is still injured, which is like brutal for him. He's having such an amazing season. But anyway, so the lines ended up being Little with Line and Ehlers, and then Wheeler with Drew Stafford, and also recently outjured Matthew Perreault, former podcast favorite Matthew Perreault. And actually, Drew Stafford has come back from injury recently. So it's a very new look top 6 right now for Winnipeg. Speaking of Matthew Perreault, no points yet and only 1 shot on goal in his 2 games. And Stafford has like 1 goal and 2 assists in his 6 games. If you're curious about some depth, guys, maybe Brian, you could comment on if it's worth looking at Perreault or Stafford. But let's focus on Brian Little here. First of all, is he a must-add if in free agency? We've had some questions about him. I feel like especially with Scheifele out, but even without him out, like it looks like he's going to be playing with good people either way. Either he's going to be on the Wheeler line or he's going to be on the Ehlers Line A line. So great potential line mates for Brian Little. I'd be curious to know like what you expect him. I'd be curious to know what you expect from him moving forward. You know, like back to this whole point pace thing. If you say Steen and Eichel around 60 point pace, is it the same for Little? A little bit less, a little bit more? Okay.
That's a lot of littles. I'll just cut in here. Mark Scheifele, you mentioned him being injured. It was a possibility that he was going to play today. So whatever's keeping him out probably won't keep him out very long unless they're really just trying to make do with an injury that should be treated, but they don't want to treat it. But I think you've caught my drift, Elon. You talk about Jack Eichel coming back and how important that is for Sam Reinhart and Evander Kane. And I think Brian Little coming back is just as important for guys like Ehlers, Liney, and Wheeler. And that's regardless of whether Scheifele goes day to day for any length of time or not. Little's a guy who spent the last 3 years playing at a 60-point pace or better. And he's also a guy who can turn that second line winger spot, either right side or left side, from an offensive black hole to a place where production can happen without a huge struggle. Like Blake Wheeler has had success on the second line, but that's because he's Blake Wheeler. We talked all season about how Ehlers and Liney, if they're on the second line away from Scheifele, you might want to stay away. I think even with Little on the second line, Stafford or Perreault probably stay as mostly fringe guys, but you don't have to worry about the rest of the players in the top 6 with Little back, because either way, if you're playing on the first line or the second line, you're playing with a good centerman, which is something that Winnipeg didn't have in Little's absence.
Sorry, I was muted. Okay. Okay, yeah, so you're clearly very high on Brian Little. I don't know if it's because he shares the same first name as you or not, but I agree. And Wheeler, you know, has been good, but he hasn't been like as good as last year. So maybe having a centerman like Brian Little compared to like whoever he's had, Nick Patan and like Dano and whoever else he's been playing with. Now he's got like, you know, like I said, Perreault and Stafford. By the way, Perreault and Stafford, anything worth looking at there for people in deeper leagues? Like how would you rank those two? And are they worth taking a look at in free agency? Like it looks like they're both in the top 6 right now.
I mean, Matthew Perreault is always capable of being a half point per game guy. He has not been very successful so far this year, just a goal and 2 assists in 13 games with a very low shooting percentage. Drew Stafford, similarly poor season so far, a goal and 3 assists in 12 games this season, only 19 shots on goal, also a low shooting percentage though. Neither one excites me. I think they're both still free agent fodder until something happens, if one of them really clicks on that second line.
Okay, yeah. So obviously, though, if you're in a deep league, like someone playing with Wheeler is going to potentially get you points because Wheeler is going to be getting points and someone else has to be in on them getting either the goal or the assists. Okay, let's go now to Pittsburgh. We're finally healthy in Pittsburgh. Hornqvist and Kunitz both back for the Penguins. So everything's back to normal. Back to our Stanley Cup winning Pittsburgh Penguins. They had Crosby with Hornqvist and Sheary on line 1, and then Kessel, Kunitz, and Malkin on line 2. And then, the dregs, Bonino, Hagelin, Rust, line 3, whatever. Top power plays, of course, Crosby, Hornqvist, Kessel, Malkin, Letang. Jake Gensel was scratched the last couple of games. Definite snoozer. We already said last week to forget about him before those guys came back. Now, definitely, there's no reason to hold on to him because he's not getting anywhere. Because it's nice to see Connor Sheary is sticking on that top line, kind of like I expected he would. Like, I don't think he's going to be getting bumped down to the bottom 6. He's been there for a long time, kind of like a Ricard Raquel, who I don't think is going to get bumped. I think he's always someone worth watching in free agency if he's available. Maybe not someone you have to add and hold forever, but when you're trying to stream people in, when you have like a good schedule ahead, I think Connor Sheary is always someone you should watch. He has 2 goals and 1 assist in his last 3 games, 12 points in 18 games on the season. That is not too shabby, and that's what you can expect playing with one of the best players in the league with Sidney Crosby. And also, Hornqvist, no slouch for sure.
Yeah, Sheary is a depth scoring option. It's pretty good. He tends to grab his points, a couple games at a time. So if you catch him at the right time, it's good. If you don't, at least you're looking at a couple shots on goal per game that you can count on. Is that all we want to say about Pittsburgh forwards, Elon?
Okay. Abrupt end to that.
Okay. Well, what else?
Okay, so I'll just move on.
You actually cut out while you were saying your intro piece, so I missed a bunch of it, but I took my best guess.
Did it cut out for the people in the chat room? What if I
probably
don't have
not?
it? What if I don't have it?
I think they would have said something. I trust them.
Let us know, guys, if something had cut out, because that makes it very hard to put the show together afterwards. Okay, so what did you say about Sheary in the end?
Did my audio cut out?
Okay. All right. No, forget it. All right. All right. I think I like Sheary. Right.
I said he's at least going to get, if he's not, he gets his points close together. They seem to come a couple games at a time. And if he doesn't get those, at least he's getting you a couple shots on goal. Elon, it's worth mentioning, he only has 4 points in his last 10 games. And if I go back further, it might be more than 10 games. So that's something to consider. Like a lot of these points, you had a few right at the start and then 2 multi-point games in a row. Then it's been pretty quiet for most of the year. Again, points in games that are close together, at least he gets you shots on goal when he's not scoring points.
Yeah, and also, though, he hasn't been playing on a full healthy top 6. Obviously, having Hornqvist and Crosby as line mates will help. And I guess I should mention Hornqvist, right? He now has 17 points in 19 games. So he has a goal and 3 assists in his 3 games since returning. So Patrick Hornqvist is having himself an amazing season. It's too bad he had that injury. So, he's not going to be able to hit that. I'd love to see how many points he could get on a full healthy season for Pittsburgh. And last year was a full healthy season, but I feel like it doesn't count because he had that huge cold streak, before the coaching change, he was down on line 3. That's not going to happen this year. He's like a definite super valuable guy. I don't even think it's worth talking too much about Patrick Hornqvist. I don't really think it's worth talking too much about Patrick Hornqvist. Let's go in nets, though. Don't look now. Marc-Andre Fleury and Matt Murray, that battle might be a bit closer than it was last week. Brian, after last week, you declared it over. I think you kind of anti-jinxed Marc-Andre Fleury there. A popular thing that people do in our patron-only Facebook group when they want to wake a player up, they just say how he sucks and he's over. Fleury has now played 2 straight games, got the wins against both Detroit and Dallas. 3 goals against versus Detroit for 903 save percentage, then a really good game against Dallas. That was 942 save percentage. Murray has been showing some weakness with 3 and 4 goals against in his last 2 games played. So if Marc-Andre Fleury was dropped in your league, if it's a shallowish league and someone was like, I don't need this backup goalie who never plays, now might be a time to look at him, maybe pick him up. Or Brian, am I just overreacting over literally 2 good games from Fleury and 2 bad games from Murray?
Well, the nice thing is that Marc-Andre Fleury finally got some run support with the team scoring 11 goals in front of him. In the season to date, before that, he had seen the Penguins score just about 2.5 goals, a little more than that, per game that he started. And Matt Murray was seeing almost 4 goals per game scored by the Penguins when he started. So it's nice that Fleury can benefit from some goals being scored. Of course, A lot of it has been his own fault, though. You can't fault the skaters when you give up a lot of goals on not so many shots. Fleury has now started 5 of the last 8 Pittsburgh games. 2 of those have been really great starts, 2 clunkers and 1 meh start. But if you look at Murray's last 5 starts, they haven't gone much better. He's had 1 great start, a few clunkers, and again, another meh start. I think if anything, this back and forth that we're seeing the pendulum swing back to Fleury for the last chunk of time. It at least says that the Penguins are kind of happy to go back and forth between the two. The contest for the number 1 goalie is not over, and this is maddening for fantasy owners. But there really is more consistency in that inconsistency than you might think. At the very least, you've got Fleury, who's only sat for consecutive games twice this year. So he's still getting, at minimum, 1 of every 3 starts in Pittsburgh, even while Matt Murray's been hot. And that puts him at least in Vasilevsky territory. So if a guy like Andrei Vasilevsky on a struggling Tampa team, by the way, is worth owning in your format, then perhaps Marc-Andre Fleury is as well.
Yeah, okay, that's fair. I'd say they're about even. Maybe Vasilevsky has more of a chance to usurp and take that number 1 job, even though, lately, that situation also is like very similar. We were saying how it's kind of over. Seems like Vasilevsky is taking the job from Bishop. Today, Bishop, I guess they lost 1-0 to Carolina. Cam Ward, by the way, Brian, a shutout, but I'm not going to get back into him again. But it was Bishop in net, had a great game. So, we're back maybe to a situation where both situations we don't know anything. So that helps. Too bad. Okay, since we're on Pittsburgh, I will mention every once in a while I like to mention a good sort of guy for hits and blocks if you're in a bangers league, as I know some of you are. Ian Cole, a defenseman on Pittsburgh. He has 6 points in his last 7 games, 1 goal and 4 assists in his last 3 games. Obviously, like I said, Pittsburgh has scored a lot of goals recently, but he's a guy who also gives you hits and blocks. I'd be curious to know if you think there's anything there. Can he get at least a moderate number of points to help support the peripherals you get from him? And also I'll throw out Justin Schultz, 2 goals and 2 assists in his last 3 games. But again, Pittsburgh has been scoring an abnormal number of goals lately, but got to be consistent, got to be complete. But
yeah.
Let me say it again. But I want to be thorough when I'm discussing hot streaks on the Pittsburgh Penguins.
Good to have a comprehensive list of hot streaks, even if they are mostly irrelevant, which is what I'm seeing from Ian Cole. Remember last year, people were thinking, oh, he's the new Olli Mata, and Olli Mata, of course, had his days where he was a must-add too. It's nothing I'm getting overly excited about, but while we are talking about the Pittsburgh blue line, I want to talk about Chris Letang. He has 2 goals, 12 assists, and 14 points in 22 games. That looks nice, but if you own him, you know that it hasn't been so nice. Over half of those 14 points, 8 of them came over 4 multi-point efforts that came in a 16-day span. And he's been so quiet outside of that. Just 1 point in 6 games before stringing together assists in consecutive games recently. 8 games and counting without a power play point. Mind you, the whole Pittsburgh power play has been pretty quiet, but it's not the numbers you'd be hoping to see from Chris Letang. I'd like it if he spread them out a little more evenly.
Yeah,
and also got more of them on the power play.
Sorry, say that last sentence again.
And also got more of them on the power play.
Yeah, I mean, come on. It's Chris Letang. It's one of these guys where if he's on a cold streak like this, don't even worry about it. He's Chris Letang. He's still there on the top power play, taking a ton of shots. He even got 6 blocks a few games ago, so he's helping you with in other. He's like saying, I'm sorry that I haven't been getting you points, so here, take these 6 blocks as compensation in the meantime. So I definitely wouldn't be worried about him. If you could buy low from him, from his owner, definitely go for that, because I think he's amazing. One more outjury, Brian, and then we could finally move. Sorry, one more outjury, Brian. I want to go to Calgary. This is a late edition. This wasn't supposed to be on the show, but the news came out just this afternoon that Johnny Gaudreau is returning today from his broken finger injury for Calgary. Calgary plays at 9:30, so this show will just have ended. So when you listen tomorrow morning to this episode, you'll already know how Gaudreau did in his return. But I will say that great. It didn't take long, and he's coming back at a good time, right? Monahan has 3 points his last 3 games. He's finally heating up, and I don't think it's bad for Monahan to now have Gaudreau back. Anyone who thinks that is, these people were also saying maybe it would wake him up when Gaudreau got injured, and I guess Monahan has been a little bit better lately, but I think this is obviously great for him, and I guess we can now go back to watching who's on that line with them. Total coin flip, right? Frolik, Brouwer, Versteeg, Kachuk, Bennett. It could be any of them. It'll probably switch around a lot, so we'll see. But, for short-term ads, you might want to be watching again on the frozen pool section of Dabber Hockey, who's playing on that line with Monahan and Gaudreau. And since we're
Yeah.
on, oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, Troy Brower, of course, was the guy that everybody wanted earlier in the season. He has gone quite cold lately. I imagine he's been dropped by a lot of people who picked him up while he was rolling earlier this year. As for Gaudreau and Monahan, there's not a whole lot that's new to say. Gaudreau is in the same situation as before. At least there's some signs of recent life from Monahan. A couple of his stronger performances of the year came in 2 of his last 3 games.
Yeah, and you know what? The moderate amount of goals from Monahan and company have been enough to lead Calgary to wins, like you said before, because they are getting such stellar goaltending from Chad Johnson, who just keeps going. He now has 9 wins and a .930 save percentage in 14 games played on the season. And Brian, so I was listening to the TSN Hockey Analytics podcast over the weekend, and if you recall, Lester, we were on that podcast last year, which was a lot of fun. And if you guys enjoyed that, maybe you could tweet at them and tell them to bring back the Keeping Karlsson guys. But anyway, okay, so I was listening to them and they made a really good point that Chad Johnson has been given this label of journeyman backup goalie. And, that's kind of how we always talk about whenever we're like talking about Chad Johnson. It's kind of like, oh yeah, well, he's Chad Johnson. He's like a backup goalie. You can't expect that much from him. But, it's maybe we're being unfair to him because if you look at his career, the only time he's played more than 27 games was last year with Buffalo, and he had a .920 save percentage. He did really well. So maybe he's the type of goalie that if you give him a chance, he can shine. And it's just now at 30 years old is when he's being given that chance. He's had a very small sample size of games in his career. Maybe we should start changing our narrative about him. Like, I'm not saying we have to go all in on Chad Johnson, but maybe we've been too biased to think that he just can't be good for long when really he's never been given a chance. He's playing today versus the Ducks, going for his 3rd straight win. Can't hurt having Gaudreau back. I wouldn't be surprised if maybe Johnson could stretch that streak a little bit longer.
I think that's a fair point, Elon. I mean, he's a .918 guy in his career, but that's being a backup. And if you're a starter, it's a different situation. Maybe that's how you thrive, by getting more reps in and being more active through the season. He's been exceptional. He's been exceptional this year through 14 starts. Brian Elliott probably is just shaking his head. Can't believe it. After leaving that tandem situation in St. Louis, I have Chad Johnson in 1 league. Elliott is a free agent, and I'm actually leaving him there, which I can't, it blows my mind that I can't force myself to drop someone to pick him up, but I just haven't felt compelled to do it with the way Chad Johnson's playing.
All right, Brian. I'm just bringing up our ad copy. Apologies. Okay.
Little slow on the uptake today.
I don't know, because I'm reading the chat room. It's like entertaining, and then it slows me down. So I don't know. It's like a better experience for people, maybe, or a worse experience in the chat room for people watching live and seeing me be slow. But it's better for me to have you there. So I don't know. I don't know what to do. Okay. Well,
do you even know what I said last?
Something about Chad Johnson.
Oh my gosh, I can't believe you didn't. It was about how Elliott's available.
Oh yeah.
And I'm not, and you had Elliott. This is
okay. Yeah, that's the league you're in with me, Brian. And I was supposed to get Chad Johnson. You outbid me, if I recall. And yeah, I saw Elliott there too. I actually picked him up just because I thought, yeah, he's good. And then I dropped him because I was like, why did I pick him up? What a waste of an acquisition. Obviously, Chad Johnson is good. I don't know. I was brain dead or something for a little bit. And I don't know what happened. I just kind of thought maybe Elliott could get another chance, but then quickly realized why? Why would he? Like, Calgary's been just fine with Chad Johnson. Brian, it's so great to be able to watch these hockey games. I have a Game Center subscription, but sometimes it's even more fun to go and watch these games live. And that's when you want to check out our sponsor for this episode, SeatGeek. Buying tickets online for sports and concerts can be a very confusing process. Like, you don't even know the final cost. You go to some other sites like Ticketmaster or whatever, and you're looking at it and you're like, okay, oh, that looks like a pretty good price. And then when you get to the checkout, it's like, oh no, it's actually 30% more because of extra fees and stuff. With SeatGeek, they just show you the price, and that's the price it is, which makes it very, very handy. The 13th of December is my wife's birthday. We have tickets to see Matilda, which, okay, I'm sure that'll be fun. But I see that the Sharks are in town playing the Leafs, and tickets are starting at only $59 on SeatGeek. I wonder if I can convince her if we can go on SeatGeek and sell our Matilda tickets and go to the Leafs game instead. We'll see. I've subscribed to the event because on SeatGeek, you are able to, get notifications if the price goes down. So, I don't know. I'd really like to see the Sharks and the Leafs, so we'll have to see If you want to check out SeatGeek, they even have a special offer to all listeners of Keeping Karlsson. Why don't you tell us about it, Brian?
Gladly. If you download the SeatGeek app or go to the SeatGeek website and buy tickets for the first time, enter the promo code KEEPING before you do, and that'll get you a $20 rebate on your first purchase. Elon, I have my rebate check right here.
Whoa.
Everyone live in the chat room, I got mine. I bought tickets for a concert. It was a month or two ago now, but I have the rebate check ready to deposit on my next trip to the bank. Thank you, SeatGeek.
SeatGeek, great site. So if you want to be a geek, you can get a seat. We're still waiting for tweets, by the way, at Keeping Karlsson. Let us know if you have a better made up slogan that I can make for SeatGeek. And Brian, why don't you, for the people that can't see in the chat room, make that fun check noise. Wow. Awesome. Spend it wisely. Okay, let's move on to our next fantasy hockey headline. Before we get to injuries, let's talk about something we brought up right at the end of the last episode when the news came out that Gerard Gallant was fired by the Florida Panthers. I've been listening to a lot of hockey podcasts. I've already heard this discussion many, many times, but I assume not everyone listens to all of these nerdy hockey podcasts. So we got to bring it up on Keeping Karlsson. What is the fantasy impact of the Florida Panthers having a new coach? Apparently, this is a whole personnel decision because they want to go more analytics focused, and Gallant wants to do it the old school way, blah, blah, blah. Don't really want to talk about that. I just want to know what the impact is. Jonathan Marchessault went back to line one with Barkov and Jágr, and UC Jokinen was sent to line two, but actually now Marchessault is day-to-day with a lower body injury. That's also some late breaking news. So we can't even really look into the full impact of the top six on Florida. But I did want to say that last week we said that Marchessault was maybe now like back to being a half point per game guy and not this like amazing almost point per game guy that he looked like at the beginning of the season. I thought maybe I would say now that he's back on line one, maybe we could bump him up a little bit, but now he's injured, so stash him or whatever. Overall, the Florida Panthers like haven't been so great for fantasy. Like aside from Roberto Luongo, like Barkov has 15 points in 25 games. That's a 50-point pace. Trocheck, 13 points. That's a 43-point pace. Jágr with 12 points for a 39-point pace. Jokinen, 4 points in 15 games. Riley Smith, 8 points. This was a team that last year we wanted all of these guys. They were all doing so well. Now even like Alex Barkov is not looking ownable in some shallow leagues. Do you think that the new coach will improve the chances for these guys? Were these guys going to get better anyways, regardless of the coaching situation? I'd love to know who you think of these Florida Panthers players you see as like a good buy low right now, because you could probably get all of them for a pretty cheap price.
I think they would be good. I think there's a chance that everything turns around in their favor. The problem is that it hasn't happened yet this year. And last year, we all knew they were overperforming and we expected a bit of a hit this year. But if they can't figure it out when the percentages aren't going their way, then obviously it gets them into a lot of trouble. It's weird from a morale point of view. Like if you think of what the players must be feeling through all this, if you watched Elliot Friedman's interview with the new coach, Tom Rowe, it sounds like this was kind of a knee-jerk move from the Panthers owner who had no desire to stay patient, even though this was a decision that was maybe going to come in a couple weeks, and he just couldn't wait that long. And I don't know how this affects players. Apparently, they liked the coach a lot and were totally caught off guard by this change. I imagine it's a bit of a gut punch, and it'll take a couple games for them to get their bearings again with a new coach, and if there's any tactical changes or systemic changes that they need to work through. I don't think anybody should be too down on the team long term, though. They do sit 3 points out of a playoff spot, which is low. They are 11th in shots for per games played, but they are 24th in goals for per games played, which is that's a big gap. If you're 11th in shots for per games played, it's nice if you're, I don't know, maybe 15th at worst. So they're receiving. So we can expect their shooting percentage to improve. They're way below league average right now there, and I think that's just a matter of things turning themselves around. Maybe a new coach helps to expedite that, and their goaltending has been a huge reason why they are just 3 points out of a playoff spot. Roberto Luongo playing out of his mind at .929. Unfortunately, James Reimers brought that number back down to earth on a team level in .896 in 9 games played so far this year.
Yeah, I drafted James Reimer in the cupful, and I have to apologize to my friend who I traded him to because obviously that didn't work out pretty well for him so far. But the thing with James Reimer on a team with Luongo is we expect that since Luongo is kind of older, maybe there'll be a point where he'll get injured or need to rest, and maybe that'll be Reimer's chance to shine. Yeah, Michael's pointing out in the chat room, Brian, you kind of called it, that you didn't expect all of these Florida players to have a sudden burst and like improve their point totals after their great seasons last year. The guys like Yager and Barkov and Huberdeau, you were saying you expected them to stay the same or even go down a bit. So, credit where credit is due. You nailed it.
Although it's been worse than that. It's been worse than a holding pattern, and they are missing Huberdeau, which we didn't expect. Elon, you asked me, if we should be cold on every Panther. I think right now you're looking at Barkov, and I'd also throw Yandel in there. I also think the year's going to get better for Ekblad, although still not like a 45, 50-point guarantee for him. We've talked about that before. So Barkov's the guy I want. Huberdeau might be a good guy to trade for. If you have too many active players on your roster, Elon, we've both talked about doing this. Trying to acquire Huberdeau with some of our surplus of players, stashing him in IR, and then rolling with all the players. And then rolling with as many of the players that we can still keep on our roster who are healthy and ready to go.
Yeah, but maybe we're being a bit overzealous. Like maybe Huberdeau isn't even going to be that amazing if he's on this lower scoring Panthers team. Brian, okay, so I got to ask you now, you're saying Barkov is someone you would want to have. Let's like sort of put that to the test. We were listing, you said you had Hall first, of course, then of the out juries, then you put Eichel and then Steen. I don't remember where you put Brian Little in that group, but would you have Barkov over any of those guys? Or if someone has Barkov and a Steen or a Little is available, would you make that swap?
I'd have Barkov ahead of Little for sure, and maybe ahead of Steen. I think I'd probably have him on par with Eichel, which is funny because Barkov has put up like a 70-point pace before, and you said Eichel could be a 70-point guy, and I said no way. But again, Barkov's numbers came from unsustainable work last year. It's pretty close between them. Maybe I have to go with Eichel just based on their values today, but I could see myself flip-flopping on that pretty easily later on. Hall is still far and away the best guy of the group.
Okay, so yeah, we know Eichel's ahead, but so you would hold Barkov over like a Brian Little? Like, I don't know. I'm surprised by that because Barkov has been so weak, and Little, another power play goal today. And then like Alex Steen, I don't know, like the way the season is going, I kind of feel like I'd have Barkov at the bottom of that list. I'm surprised you're so high on him considering, he's been pretty weak, and you called it kind of earlier in the year that you didn't expect too much from him. Like what kind of point pace do you see from Barkov? You're seeing like a for sure over 60-point pace, I guess?
Well, it's funny because you're coming at it if I already have Barkov and these guys are available, and I'm thinking of if I'm it. Is that how you? Yeah, I actually can't figure out how to finish that thought.
You're saying, and I'm thinking if I'm.
Yeah, if I'm just picking between them all on the waiver wire, so I have no claim to any of them right now. It would be hard for me to drop Barkov. I think if that's what it was, though, and my team was struggling, like there's a whole lot of contextual factors there, right? Like if I'm in first and flying, I don't care. I'll have Barkov and try and wait it out, weather the storm. If my free agent list is rarely picked over, like if there are other similar players in free agency, though, maybe I will drop Barkov and pick up Little instead. There's a lot going in there. I'm just trying to say who I think is going to have the better point pace from now till the end of the year.
Okay, yeah, no, that's fair. That's what I'm asking you. I don't know. The thing with Barkov is he's good. It seems like maybe his line mates aren't as good as we hope they would be. I guess when Huberdeau comes back, we'll see. But give me the guy playing with Blake Wheeler or the guy playing with Tarasenko, I think. Anyway, okay, so let's go now to some injuries. I guess that's the third fantasy hockey headline of the week. We have to go to Chicago. Two big ones. First of all, Corey Crawford has had an appendectomy. Okay, and he's expected to be out 2 to 3 weeks. He's been having like such a great season, 12 wins in 20 games, a 927 save percentage. He had a 924 save percentage the previous 2 seasons. So like I feel like Corey Crawford is kind of underrated. Like there's a guy, Brian, in our league that we're competing against each other in, Pat, and he took Corey Crawford with his first pick in the first round. And then he told me after that it was a mistake and he meant to take Corey Schneider. But actually it's worked out pretty well for him that he got Crawford instead of Schneider because he's getting more wins and much better numbers. But anyways, now that Crawford is down, it's Scott Darling time, and Darling didn't have a great game yesterday. He's playing again today. He has been below average so far on the year, a 907 save percentage on the season. But at the same time, Chicago is at the top of league standings. So, which surprises me, by the way. I didn't realize that Chicago was doing so well. But I mean, so if you could get a goalie on one of the top teams, I guess you have to do it in the short term. You got to go grab Scott Darling, right?
So it's interesting because you have Scott Darling thinking that, well, he's stepping into a starting role on a league leading team, but I'm not sure that's exactly what's happening here. I think he's starting, but I'm not sure that's exactly what's happening here. I think he's stepping into a starting role on a good but not glaringly good team that has been carried by the other goalie all season long. We'll see how he copes. Hopefully Corey Crawford isn't out for too long. I know Christopher Hine of the Chicago Sun-Tribune put up a very clever article the other day where he interviewed former NHL goalie Chris Mason, who had an appendectomy when playing for St. Louis. Chris Mason missed 13 days. He said it wasn't too bad, aside from some discomfort after the appendectomy, when really, and like he only really felt it when he was stretching to make a stop. And I can't believe I'm going into this much detail, but the article also mentioned Mason was lucky to have his appendectomy before his appendix burst. No word yet on whether Crawford's appendix had burst before surgery. Crawford is a huge reason, though, why Chicago is at the top of the standings, third in the league in even strength save percentage, behind only Dubnyk and Price, ahead of everybody else. And aside from him, like I said, Chicago is reasonably average in other metrics. So we'll see how Scott Darling can hold up behind a team that has been riding their goalie most of the season. Backing up is now Lars Johansson. He's gotten the call. He's a 29-year-old goalie. This is his first season in North America after playing for Frölunda of the Swedish Elite League for the past 3 years. He's got a 6-7-1 record and a 9-11 save percentage in 16 AHL games played so far. So it's safe to say that this is Scott Darling's net for as long as Crawford is out.
Right. But again, we're talking like 2-3 weeks. I don't know. I feel like considering that Darling hasn't been that good, and I think I agree with you that I'm not like expecting the wins to like pour in with Darling in net. Like we got a tweet from @whoiskrager today saying someone cut Parisi in a panic to grab Darling after Crawford went down, worth a waiver claim, which like, okay. And then I obviously had to get into a conversation with, who would he drop? And by the way, Brian, I have a PSA about tweets that we get in terms of this was a good tweet, but sometimes I have some qualms with the types of tweets we get. I don't get enough information to give a good answer, but maybe I'll do that later. But all that to say, I think you'd be kind of silly to give up too much to get Scott Darling. Maybe he'll get you a win or two each week for the next couple of weeks. Then he'll become useless again when Crawford comes back. And I'm not expecting him to even be so amazing. So, like grab him if you can. If you have a room for a goalie, like why not get the number one goalie on Chicago? But I wouldn't give up anything too big for him. I wouldn't be dropping Zach Parise. Okay, the other big injury on Chicago, Jonathan Toews has already missed 5 games with a back injury. He was put on IR on Friday, and it was announced today that he's not even like close to coming back. Apparently, he's going to be taking a break from practices. So let me ask you, is it time to buy low on Jonathan Toews? Like, he's not having a great season, only 12 points in 21 games. We were so excited also about Marian Hossa a few weeks back. He's clearly missing Jonathan Toews as a line mate. He only has 1 goal in his last 7 games. He's been playing with guys like Ryan Hartman and Vinny Hinostroza. Like, these are the line mates that we have for Marian Hossa, because obviously Chicago has been running with Anisimov and Kane and Panarin, and that line is amazing, gets all their points. And Hossa, like, doesn't have a chance. He's not even on the top power play. Like, I kind of want to ask you, aside from just your thoughts on Jonathan Toews, like, should I be thinking of dropping Marian Hossa in the cupful? Because I have Alex Steen in my IR, and I set my lineup all the way until January, so I can just wait it out until someone else gets injured before I bring Steen in. But, like, Hossa's doing nothing. At the same time, I don't want to give a free gift to everyone else in my league, and they could just get Marian Hossa for free.
After his blistering start, and, I've talked about how Panik's crazy start wasn't sustainable and how Anisimov's crazy start wasn't sustainable. And you might wonder, does Hossa fall into that category? He's without an assist in 11 games, 4 goals in that span. On the season, he has 12 goals on 57 shots. There's some aggression still to come. I do think that Hossa can hang in as a relevant producer, though, with a healthy Jonathan Toews, even though neither one is inspiring much confidence. Toews has called himself 2 points in 9 games before getting injured, just 12 points in 21 games on the year. And look at who Hossa, Elon, you were saying, look at who he has to play with while Taves is out, Chicago down the middle right now is Anisimov, Kruger, Hinestroza, and Tyler Mote. I always forget how exactly to say his name. There's no centers, though, who can make offense happen. Kruger is the only one of that group who's a positive possession driver. It's a pretty yucky situation in Chicago.
Yeah, by the way, we're getting some important, helpful information here in the chat room. Patty is pointing out that her son had an appendectomy. That's a 3 to 4 inch incision. And it took, she thinks it's going to be 3 to 4 weeks for sure. But then Michael said he was back playing fantasy hockey 3 days after his appendectomy. So Crawford is just a sissy. So maybe, Crawford will have a Michael-like return and will be able to come back sooner than expected. Brian, let's go now to Dallas. Patrick Sharp out again with concussions. Out again with concussion symptoms. He only has 2 points in 11 games on the year. Like, is it time that we just kind of let go of Patrick Sharp? Like, he's not doing anything. He's clearly injury prone. He's having trouble getting over this concussion, which, by the way, I feel bad for him. Like, that sucks that he has these concussions. But I'm just thinking, if you could stash him, why not? But it doesn't seem like you'll be wanting to drop anyone to bring him back out of your IR when he returns. Like, I think a lot of people were dropping people when Patrick Sharp came back before, and they're probably regretting it because it's like, what has he done? Absolutely nothing. So I don't know. I'm kind of over Patrick Sharp at this point. If someone asks me who they should drop to bring in Sharp, I'm going to probably say leave Sharp in IR or just drop him. Not great also for Jason Spezza, who was playing with the likes of Richie and Korpikoski and Faxa and Roussel. Like, that's who he plays with now that Sharp is out. And even when Sharp was there, he was playing with Sharp, who wasn't doing anything. Spezza is like a guy who maybe we have to start giving up on him being like a 60-point pace guy like we kind of have been relying on for the past few years. He has 11 points in 19 games played on the season, which is like closer to a 50-point pace, less than a 50-point pace so far this year. So I don't know, Brian, like, I'm not feeling great about Jason Spezza, and I'm like kind of over Patrick Sharp.
I hear you. I'm over Patrick Sharp too. Drop him if you can't stash him, and if your IR is full, just straight up drop him. Don't even consider him over another injured player right now. He's not worth it. As for Spezza, last year we were lauding his huge shots on goal rates and said that those were a big reason for him having his first 30-goal year since back in 2011, 2012. And, his shooting percentage, rebounding from a rough couple years to be the second highest of his career, helps as well. But that's not all that's happening going back into this year. Not just a regression in his shooting percentage. His shot rates are down from last year as well. Not necessarily in an alarming way because he's played most of his very good career with shot rate numbers like these. Let's just count last year's as a bonus. This year, it's his on-ice shooting percentage that is unreasonably low so far. Part of that is variance, and part of that is also, like you were saying, Elon, the quality of his line mates. I imagine that has an impact. Faxa, Sharp, and Roussel are his 3 most common line mates this season. Neither one an offensive firebrand in 2016, 2017. So he's going to need some help from his line mates. I still have faith that he could be a 60-point guy. If not, I think he'll get close.
Yeah, I don't know. I think maybe like closer to 50, maybe 55. I would definitely want all of those guys we've listed, the Brian Littles and the Steens and obviously the Eichels. I think I'd want them all over Jason Spezza right now because these line mates, it's not good. And he's not going to get on that top line because he's a center. They need him to, I guess, be on the second line. So he doesn't get to play with Ben and Seguin. He's with them on the power play, which is nice. But, I like to look at the opportunity, and I don't see much there for Spezza. Like you say, Brian, he's a good player, but I just don't see how he could get 60 points with such weak line mates. And then since we're on Dallas, we have to talk about the D situation. Even though, for me, I don't really see why, but we've gotten so many questions about Julius Honka. People have been like, why haven't you guys talked about Honka? It's okay. Klingberg, yes, he missed a meeting and got scratched. Then he got healthy scratched for another game. So that's very concerning. And when Klingberg was scratched, 3 games ago versus Detroit, Honka stepped in on the top power play. And so that's why people, I guess, are thinking, oh, man, is he going to potentially usurp John Klingberg on the top power play? But since then, Klingberg has been back and even got a power play assist against Pittsburgh on Thursday, which I know isn't much. Baby steps, nothing yesterday against Colorado, but hopefully this is the start of Klingberg getting back there. But I think Kling is the main number 1 power play guy. I don't expect Honka to be usurping him, at least this season. Overall, he has 3 assists and 17 shots in 7 games played with the big club. No points and only 3 shots on goal in his last 3 games. So, Brian, is he worth taking a flyer on? If he's in free agency for people, should they be grabbing Honka? Or is it kind of like, sure, if Klingberg is going to get scratched again, like take Honka for that game, but otherwise not too much value?
Klingberg still has to be the guy, which in my mind limits the value of Honka. Klingberg has 5 shots in his last 2 games, and that's the most promising sign from him that we've seen in a while. You'd actually have to add up all the shots he took from his previous 10 games combined to get 5 shots on goal. That's right, 5 shots over 10 games. Sliced another way, he only had 3 shots in 8 games, and sliced another way, he went without registering a single shot on goal in 5 of 6 games. And that's a problem for John Klingberg. This is a guy who averaged on the plus side of 2 shots per game last season. 1 shot per game is just not his style, although it was closer to that in his rookie season. But I'm focusing on those 5 shots in his last 2 games. That's the hope for me. He's too good to have suddenly stopped trying. Like I don't know exactly what's changed in Dallas, and I've been trying to read into it and look into it. I haven't found any good info. If anyone has, feel free to send it along at Keeping Karlsson. I'm not sure what the deep down systemic reason is for his struggle this year, but I still think he's going to be the guy. Once that power play gets up and running, he'll be the one cashing in.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird. Klingberg was so good a couple years ago. He like came in, pulled a full ghost bear, just like took over on the top power play, never looked back. And then last year, he was great all season. I don't know why all of a sudden he's not doing well. I really just don't see it happening that all of a sudden he gets bumped for Julius Honka, no matter what his pedigree is. And maybe we'll get another podcast at some point with one of our great prospects experts like Peter Harling, or we also have Cam in the Patreon group, who also is a writer for Dobber Hockey, knows a lot about prospects. So we could ask him for more information on Honka, but come on. I don't know. Take a flyer, but I'm not too excited about him. I would probably leave him in free agency, which I have in all of my leagues. Okay, next injury. Erik Johnson is out 6 to 8 weeks with a broken fibula on Colorado. And that is actually a big, what's the opposite of a boom? Not a bust. It's a big... What's the word I'm looking for?
Opposite of boom.
It's a big, whatever.
Problem.
Yeah. Oh, loss. Okay. Big loss for Colorado. Like, you might not think it, but Erik Johnson has quietly been having a really great season. He has 11 points in 23 games, which, half point per game for a defenseman. That's really good. That's an over 40-point pace. He has 47 shots on goal. Like, that's over 2 shots a game, like 44 hits, 62 blocks. So he's a huge contributor for his fantasy owners in multi-cat bangers leagues, of course. And so obviously the question now is, what is the effect on the Colorado D-men? Like Tyson Barrie, I think will be fine. I know, Brian, you were telling me it might be good for Tyson Barrie. I feel like he was already always on the top power play. So he has 5 points in his last 7 games. So I think Tyson Barrie, fine. I don't know if he necessarily gets better. I think the guy who I would look at is maybe Francois Beauchemin gets to maybe... It's to maybe regain some of his value that he had last year, where he got points every once in a while and was like a huge blocks beast. This year, he only has 49 blocks in 23 games. Compare that to 256 blocks in 82 games last year. So we're talking 2 blocks a game this year versus 3 blocks a game last year. I think that's a lot because this year he's averaging only like around 20 minutes a game compared to over 25 minutes a game last year. And now Erik Johnson, a guy who had been taking like so many minutes on Colorado, someone has to take them. I think it's going to be Beauchemin. He's probably also going to get back on that second power play with like Patrick Weirkosh, who I'm not going to say that you should go and grab. So I think if your league counts blocks and he's been dropped because, he wasn't given points and not even like so many blocks, I think now's the time to maybe take a look at Francois Beauchemin.
This is the best time and the worst time to acknowledge how great a season Erik Johnson has been having. He's been more valuable than Barrie so far in pretty much any format that credits blocks and hits. And if he stayed within 5 points or so of Barrie through the year, that advantage and value would likely continue. Harder to do now that he's injured, of course, but again, a good time to give him kudos for what he's done to date as a top 15, 20 defenseman in most bangers and mash leagues. Any anxious Barrie owners that Erik Johnson is going to come back and take away that top power play spot, they can rest a little easier now, though they likely already have been. Barrie's got a goal, 6 assists. Barrie's got a goal and 6 assists for 7 points in his last 7 games, 13 shots on goal. Don't expect much to change for him with Johnson out. You asked about Beauchemin. Elon, he's already picking up his blocks game. He has 3 or more blocks in 6 of his last 7 games, 22 blocks in that span, which brings him back to that 3+ per game pace. More time on ice could help him pick up a couple more. But remember, there are a handful fewer shot attempts coming at Colorado each game now that the Patrick Waugh days are behind us. You also speculated on his power play time. He did see 3.5 minutes of power play time last game, and he's used to seeing either no power play time at all or a couple shifts here and there. So that's something to continue watching.
Yeah, and I guess the final impact is probably this is not great for the Colorado goalies, losing a good defenseman like Erik Johnson, like Semyon Varlamov, who still is hanging on to that job. We talked about, I think it was last week, how he had a minor injury. We thought maybe Pickard would once again have the opportunity to take advantage. Pickard blew it for his owners who started him against Nashville. He let in 5 goals and like kind of blew the week for a lot of people. And now Varlamov has actually had 2 straight decent games since coming back from injury, like both losses, but I think only 2 goals against in each game. So, take what you can get if you're a Varlamov owner. I think he's got his job back for now. I mean, I guess he didn't really lose it. He was just injured, but he came back and he has the job. But now there's less good defensemen to try to help him out. So I don't know how great this will be for Varlamov. Okay, Brian, that's all I got for the injuries. We already covered the outjuries. So now why don't we go to our hot streaks, our little sustainable or fleeting segment, even though some of these guys, I just have to mention, even though there's not really much you can do about it. Like I want to start in Edmonton. Leon Draisaitl has been on fire since joining the top line with McDavid and Lucic. He has 7 goals and 6 assists in his last 10 games, which brings him up to 21 points in 26 games on the season. This is the Leon Draisaitl that we remember from last year playing with Taylor Hall. Like he's been so good. Brian, we really blew it. We had the chance to add him. He got dropped in our joint league, when he wasn't really doing much. He was just kind of on the top power play, getting power play points every once in a while. Man, the guy who added him like struck gold. He's been like one of the top players in the league lately. So anyway, if you're a Draisaitl owner right now, is it sell high time? Because like maybe he won't stick with McDavid, and then if that happens and he gets bumped from that line, he'll probably regress.
Yeah, totally. You didn't do anything wrong, or should I say we didn't do anything wrong. Anyone who dropped Draisaitl didn't do anything wrong to drop him, because he went 12 games with 1 goal and 1 assist, and that's all. And he had 1 or 0 shots on goal in half of those games. Now he's on this crazy run and took 8 shots against Winnipeg the other night. He's got a really funny game log for someone with 21 points in 26 games. Have that huge black hole. He essentially has 19 points in 14 games this year. It's feast or famine with this guy. The feast is when he's with McDavid. The famine's when he's without. He'll get shuffled around again soon, at which point anyone who owns him is going to have to wonder how long until he gets back with McDavid.
Okay, we'll see. Last year, I don't know if you recall, we were talking about how great he was doing when he was with Taylor Hall. And like for a long time, you were saying, oh, it's probably not going to last. You ended up kind of being right. Like he ended up slowing down near the end of the year and kind of blew it for people who were relying on him in their fantasy playoffs. So I guess here we go again, except maybe now it's even more precarious of a situation just because we've seen lots of people taking turns playing with Connor McDavid. And by the way, Connor McDavid, he is up to 34 points in 26 games. He's like starting to run away with this Art Ross race. Like second place is Kucherov with 29 points. It's already 5 points difference with, a little more than a quarter into the season. So if that continues, he could end up winning by like, I don't know, 15, 20 points over the next guy. Obviously, Sidney Crosby is the one to maybe watch because Crosby has 26 points, so 8 points back, but he's played 7 fewer games. But I don't know. I feel like if McDavid doesn't get injured, I don't see how he loses this race. Like I think Connor McDavid for now is like a 75, 80% chance of winning this Art Ross trophy. He's like so good.
You'll find no argument for me.
Okay. And then also, I guess maybe we were a little bit premature last week in anointing Oscar Klefbom as the top power play D man in Edmonton. I feel like we were saying, or maybe it was more me. I was saying, okay, finally, now we know who's the top power play defenseman. It's Oscar Klefbom. He's doing great. Well, since our last episode, it seems like Andrej Sekera has taken over that job. Clef only has 1 assist in his last 4 games played. So obviously I apologize to everyone who added Klefbom due to my like really pumping him up. Meanwhile, Sekera has a goal and 3 assists in his last 3 games played, including 1 power play point, which is what you can expect when you're playing on the top power play with, let's say it all together, Connor McDavid. You play with Connor McDavid. You play with McDavid, you get points. Brian, I have Klefbom in 1 league. Should I swap him with Sekera, or do I like just hold Klefbom like I did all year? Because I still think he should be the top power play defenseman. Like it doesn't seem like Andrej Sekera. Doesn't seem like he's that type of guy.
Well, first off, I need to share the blame. I also was all in on Clefbaum, saying that the Oilers had finally found their power play one QB. He was right under their nose the whole time, and he remains under their nose, except not on that unit anymore. I don't know. Sekera could do okay on the top power play unit. Like you said, he's going to get points because he's playing with McDavid with the man advantage, so that's good. I feel like they're going to get shuffled around for a while, too. So we'll see. If you have Sekera right now, or sorry, if you have Clefbaum right now, I guess you might as well swap him out for Sekera, because who else is going to add him?
Yeah, well, unless it's someone who listens to the podcast and thinks that eventually Clefbaum will take the job back
But we're
in time
not
for the fantasy hockey playoffs.
But we're not advising to hold Clefbaum in the meantime. I feel like he has very little value if he's not on that top unit.
Yeah, that's true. So again, you got to check out Frozen Pools or whatever. Follow like Edmonton beat writers on Twitter to find out when Clefbaum's going to get his chance. I'm sure it won't be long, by the way. Like I'm thinking I'm holding Clefbaum for a little while. Like I'd like to wait like another 2-3 weeks to see if he doesn't get that job back. I think he just might. But obviously Edmonton's on a nice little run right now. They're playing again tonight. Who knows? Maybe by the time you listen to this episode, Clefbaum will have already gotten like 3 power play points today against Minnesota. I guess that's unlikely because Devin Dubnyk has been so amazing in nets. I don't know if Edmonton. Well, there you go. Connor McDavid scores all these points. Devin Dubnyk stops all of these points. So it's going to be an interesting game. Ooh, maybe I'll check that out after we're done the podcast. But okay, Brian, next hot streak. This is kind of like a hot streak from before that's already over, but you told me you want to talk about him. And I always want to do what you ask because you're my very good friend. So let's talk about Valtteri Filppula, who you said early in the week. I want to talk about Filppula this week. And I see why. He was on a nice streak of 1 goal and 6 assists in 8 games played. But now he only has 1 goal in his last 4 games played. So he's slowed down, but you like him. So go ahead.
Well, I mentioned him as somebody who could step up with Stamkos out, and he did. So I wanted to follow up. He had a goal and 6 assists over 8 games played, but now he's scoreless in 2, which for you, Elon, that would be reason enough to drop him. He had actually started to see less ice for a bit, but he's still doing fine. Like he's still definitely in the top 4 or 5 based on ice time in Tampa. Somebody whose ice time has not gotten a boost with Stamkos out that we were thinking it might. Nemesnikov, his ice is way down. He's snoozing right now. So if you're still holding on to him for some reason from the days in which he was playing in the top 6, he has been decidedly in the bottom 6 for the last little while.
Okay, yeah, so definitely drop Nemesnikov. And Brian, you're like throwing a little shade at me because I would like probably just drop Filppula after a couple games. I'll bet you for sure if you had Filppula, I'll bet you're in leagues where Filppula is available as a free agent and you haven't added him. So don't even tell me that you would like be so great because you'd hold on to Filppula even though he has no points in 2 games. And there's another guy on Tampa Bay who you've held on to when I think maybe you shouldn't have, and that's Jonathan Drouin. He's currently playing on line 3 with Paquette and Joel Vermin, or at least in his last game. And actually, maybe I shouldn't say currently because he's out with an undisclosed injury today. So who even knows what's the situation with Jonathan Drouin? I think this is actually good news for you in the cupful because now you get to stash Drouin in your IR and not have to worry about him for a little bit and stream some better players. Hey, you could stream Valtteri Filppula, I'm sure, if you want. But yeah, he's been pretty disappointing, I think, overall on the season. I would like to know what you're going to do with Drouin. I guess I was kind of more curious about this when he wasn't injured because now it's kind of easy for you. But like you have Rickard Rakell, who I know I keep bringing up. He scored another goal yesterday, still on the top line, like I predicted he would be. If you had to drop someone from your team, I was curious if you'd be dropping Rakell or Drouin.
I'm lucky I didn't have to make that decision. I'm still not ready to. I had a tough enough time deciding between those 2 and 2 others. I ended up dropping Evander Kane, and now Drouin might be injured, so maybe and now Drouin might be injured, and Kane's already gone. Anyway, Drouin is leading the way in time on ice in Tampa for the last couple weeks, even more so over the last 4 games. But that doesn't negate the fact that he has been dry most of the season. Interestingly enough, his shooting numbers are up at even strength from last year, but just 1 goal on 41 shots during 5-on-5 play, which is a reason why he hasn't really put too many points on the board. I still see a potential big season ahead for him, especially with Stamkos not coming back anytime soon. I'm hoping that his sudden departure from the lineup is not a sign of anything concussion related, which caused him to miss time before. And Elon Filppula, I actually dropped him just as he was starting that run. So there you go.
Oh, That's too bad. That's like the opposite of what you're supposed to do. But how are you supposed to know? Even though you kind of called it that he was going to go on this run. So I'm not even sure why you did that, but it's tough. And obviously your team is doing well, so I shouldn't be giving you too hard of a time. I mean, it's not doing as well as my team. Is Dave still in the chat, by the way? Dave, I'm over 700%. Dave, I'm over like 700% winning percentage right now, or not 700%. How do you say that? 0.700. Okay. Anyway, let's move on. Next hot streak. Let's go to Mike Hoffman in Ottawa. Oh man, I hope you didn't drop him when he was slumping early on. I remember we had so many questions of Hoffman or this guy, Hoffman or this guy. I feel like Hoffman or Ehlers came up like a million times. I don't even remember what I said, but I really hope I didn't tell you to drop Mike Hoffman because he is on fire as well. He's like Draisaitl level fire right now. 5 goals and 6 assists in 7 games played since returning from his injury. And along with him, Mark Stone has 8 points in that span. Erik Karlsson only 6 points in the last 7 games. So he's like been a snoozer, right? Less than a point per game for Erik Karlsson. But no, so those 3 guys are obviously great on the Sens. I'm curious to know, Brian, aside from those 3 and I guess the goalies, who would you want next on the Sens at this point? Like, would you want Turris or Brassard, who've both been kind of slow but taking turns playing with guys like Stone and Hoffman? It's actually been Brassard with Hoffman and Stone at even strength, and Turris with those guys on the top power play, or maybe Bobby Ryan, even though he's injured right now. I'm curious to get your sense of who else you want on the Sens, aside from, for sure, Hoffman and Stone, who have been amazing.
And Karlsson, but I will take Kyle Turris next of that group. He's got very good even strength numbers, and he's got the power play time as well. So he would be the choice I make. And going back to Mike Hoffman, how exciting. He finally broke through. Everybody who's been waiting, you've been rewarded. I know I tried to buy low on him for a little while. That window has now closed with a hat trick and an apple in 5 shots versus Buffalo. And then he had a goal on 7 shots the next night. If you can find someone who thinks they're selling high on Mike Hoffman, though, that might still be a deal you can get done.
Yeah, but then you have to give up someone somewhat good, I guess. All right, next up. Sorry, I got a message. All right, it's because of you. You messaged me, and so I had to bring up my Google Hangouts, and I see my other messages.
Good comment.
Next up, let's go to Columbus. I wanted to say Boone Jenner alert. He's probably been dropped in every league, so I should mention that he has goals in his last 2 games. Lots of shots lately, 10 hits 3 games ago versus Tampa Bay. So in your bangers and mash league, yes, I'm starting to appropriate the term. I didn't like bangers league, at least bangers and mash league. We could kind of call it our own. I know that was Brian's corny comment a couple of weeks ago. Anyway, Boone Jenner is like good again, or at least decent. I think that if he was dropped in your league and you are in one of these leagues that count hits, I think it might be time to take a look at adding him again. He's in the top 6 pretty frequently now. That was one of the problems. He was like getting dropped down in the lineup, but he's playing with Dubinsky and Atkinson. Atkinson having an amazing year. Dubinsky also a guy who hits a lot. So that line must be painful playing against this second line on Columbus. But yeah, Boone Jenner, he's doing things.
Boone Jenner is doing things. Well, how nice for anyone who's had the patience to hold him. I imagine in hits leagues, that's the only situation where people are really holding on to him. However, Elon, goals in consecutive games does not make Boone Jenner hot, just like nothing in 2 games does not make Phil Pula cold. Wow, I think I managed like a triple negative in there. So, but I think you know what I'm trying to say. The shots and hits in the meantime, though, they certainly help suggest that Boone Jenner is back to being sort of Boone Jenner, even if he hasn't scored a ton yet. Remember, though, Boone Jenner is still nothing very fancy. 50 points is probably the reasonable, optimistic expectation. There's not much different when you look at this year's numbers so far and last year's numbers in terms of the offense he's generating. He's still not consistently seeing good time on ice, nowhere really near last year's almost 17 minutes of ice time per game. But he did have 4 straight games of being at 15 minutes or higher recently. So that was a good sign before, of course, going back down to like 13 or 14. So if his time on ice stays in the 12 to 14 minute range, I'll give him 45 points. If it goes up to the 15 to 17 minute range, maybe he can crack 50. It's pretty impressive that with second unit power play time on ice and a hefty time on ice cut at evens, he's still 4th on the team in shots on goal. So it is too bad for him that he doesn't sneak on to that top power play unit where he might be able to do a little bit more. There's somebody else who's not on the top unit right now, Brandon Saad, who is Columbus's 4th ranked scorer with 7 goals and 13 assists for 20 points in 23 games. Now, 4th ranked scorer on Columbus is not something to get very excited about, but guess how many of his 20 points, Elon, have come on the power play?
Well, first of all, like when you say 20 points in 23 games, that's already enough for me to get excited about. I don't care how that ranks. But okay, so 20 points. How many of them are on the power play? I don't know. You're saying he's not even on the top unit. So what, like 3, 4?
Zero. He
What?
has 0 points. Actually,
What?
wait. I didn't write it down because I wanted to surprise you, but now I forget myself if that's true.
How can you
Yes.
not remember if it's 0
No,
or
I
not?
got it is. It is. I just had a moment.
Okay.
0 points. He has no points on the power play so far. And if you look at the guys who are ahead of him in scoring on Columbus, Foligno, Wenberg, and Atkinson, they each have 21 points, so only one more point than Saad, but they have 10, 9, and 10 power play points respectively. So you look at Saad's numbers, he's tied for 5th in the entire NHL in total even strength points. He's 3rd in even strength points per 60 minutes, and that's in a clump at the top with Connor McDavid, Steven Stamkos, and Sidney Crosby. So Brandon Saad is pretty good. Somebody, by the way, we talked about Jenner and Saad, both not on the top unit yet, because there is a player on the top unit who may be ripe for the picking, or whose spot might be ripe for the picking. We're going to get to him in cold streaks. Elon, first, let's wrap up hot streaks.
Oh, look at this. I don't have a guy ready, so this is also going to be a surprise for me. Why would you just... All right. By the way, Brian, I know you're saying that 2 goals in 2 games isn't like a hot streak for Jenner, but I'm trying to make a good show for the listeners here, and by the time he has another good week, he won't be available anymore. So that's why I'm just letting you guys know that Jenner's doing something. I agree. I'm not saying that he's like on fire right now. He's not at Draisaitl or Hoffman level for sure. Okay, I wanted to go to Anaheim quickly. Have we talked about Cam Fowler yet this season? I feel like we haven't. I know we have a patron who thinks he's like really bad, but right now the stats don't say that, or at least not the main counting stats. He has points in 3 straight games, up to 16 points in 25 games on the season, 53 shots, 8 power play points, 32 blocks. Cam Fowler has been a great guy to own in your fantasy league if you drafted him. I wonder, like, is it sell high time for him? He's on a 52-point pace. His best year ever was his rookie year in 2010, 2011. Oh, I'm surprised Cam Fowler's been in the league this long. He had 40 points that year. He's never cracked 40 since. And like I said, now he's on a 52-point pace. I know, Brian, you have Vatanen in one league. If you were offered Fowler for Vatanen, would you take it?
I think I would hang on to Vatanen, and here's why. In 25 games in, it's hard to say that Fowler is going to stop rolling. I think he is. I think at the start of the season, when we didn't talk about him or we touched on him, we were so we're so tired of all of the Anaheim blue line chatter between him, Vatanen, and Lindholm, and we saw the beginning of the season as maybe a showcase opportunity so that they could ship Fowler out and bring Lindholm in at a reasonable price that fits under the cap and into their lineup. But this showcase has not ended. His 7 goals so far this year put him just 3 goals away from his career high of 10. And that's great. Great for Cam Fowler, making the most of his opportunities, but I don't think the puck is going to keep going in for him this way. Over the last 2 seasons, the guy was on a 33-point pace. That's all. Good looks on the power play are sure going to help improve on that, but he also had those last year. 17 of his 28 points last season came with the man advantage. He already has 8 even strength points this year. He had 11 in 69 games last year. There's not enough that has changed with Cam Fowler in his offensive numbers or in his deployment to make me think that this is something that's sure to last all year. I think if you want to be optimistic, he falls back to a 40-point pace guy. So I think you can sell high on him. Meanwhile, you have Semi Vatanen, who had a nice run to start the year, then just 2 assists in his next 12 games. Shot rates are still down, but the silver lining is that his 11 and 25 points is a more reasonable total for the rest of the season to go by than Fowler's 16 points in 25 games.
Right. I know how sometimes you like it better when a player is doing worse, because that means that it's more likely that he can do better in the future. Let's not get into that again. But yeah, I think if you have Cam Fowler, I agree. Maybe time to sell high. I wonder if you could get that John Klingberg, who we talked about before, for Fowler. I think that's a pretty good return. Maybe not if your league counts all these peripherals, because Klingberg's really giving you nothing. Anyway, since we're on Anaheim, I already brought him up a bunch of times. Let me just say, Brian, Rickard Rakell is the leading scorer on Anaheim right now. He has 10 goals, even though he's only played 16 games out of the team's 25 games. He has more goals than Corey Perry, even though he's given Perry a 9-game cushion. That's all I'll say about Rickard Rakell. I won't even ask you to respond. Let's move on now to Detroit. We've had a lot of people already asking in the chat room, are you guys going to talk about Anthony Mantha? Okay, sure, let's do it. He has 6 points in 10 games since he joined the team. He's a prospect that a lot of people have been talking about for a few years now. Like, I feel like I've heard his name a lot, at least over the past couple of years. He's been playing on a line with Zetterberg and Tatar and also getting power play time with those guys. So definitely... Oh, I don't like what I'm seeing in the chat room here. But anyways, so definitely in a situation to succeed, and he's taking advantage of it. So I guess my question, Brian, is Anthony Mantha worth an ad right now while his deployment stays like this? He didn't get a point today in Detroit's 4-3 OT win over the Islanders, but he did take 4 shots. So still obviously being a meaningful player. He had 17 minutes and a half of ice time. So he's being used as an offensive producer. And I'm curious to know what your thoughts are on Anthony Mantha.
He's a guy that Detroit fans have been screaming for the past couple years, and it probably shouldn't have taken an injury for him to get playing time with the big club. I suppose you could grab him. Interesting to note that Tatar, who is also playing with Zetterberg, has been doing nothing with that opportunity. So maybe Mantha's better than Tatar, or maybe the puck is just going more towards Mantha than it is Tatar for the time being. We are in a position, though, to recognize what Henrik Zetterberg is doing lately. No goals and 4 assists in his first 9 games. Since then, in 16 games, he's got 5 goals, 8 assists, and 13 points. He is off and running. There's no way he's still a free agent in your league. But if there is somehow a way, you can end that right now by adding him.
So that's Zetterberg. And what about Mantha? Like, do you add him?
Yeah, if you want to cycle in a depth guy and take a flyer, sure. There's not a ton of offense in Detroit, but if there is offense, playing with Zetterberg is a good place to get it.
Yeah, and I feel like if you have any of these other Detroit guys, I don't know, like, why not bring in Mantha? Like, if you have, for example, Vanek, he hasn't done much. Like, you know, all of them are sort of taking turns getting points every once in a while. Mantha seems to be in a good situation and getting some points now. Brian, that's it for the hot streaks for me. I just have a couple cold streak guys I want to mention, but I see you have some people on your list. So did you want to bring a couple hot streak guys up yourself?
Just very quickly, another guy who did very little in his first 9 games, Torrey Krug. In fact, he did nothing in his first 9 games. No goals, no assists. Now in his last 16, he's got a goal and 10 assists for 11 points. Congratulations to everybody who waited on him or snagged him out of free agency, as I did, inexplicably, in one league. And then Radim Verbata, the 35-year-old, leads all Coyotes in scoring. He's on a 5-game point streak right now. 17 points in 23 games on the season. He has 8 goals already. Those put him more than halfway to last year's 63-game total of 13. And for Cam Fowler, I was like, oh, that's bad to be that close to your last year's total. But the difference with Verbata is it's looking somewhat sustainable. So Radim Verbata and Torrey Krug are my last hot streaks of the week.
Brian, you know that we also snagged Krug in our joint league. Why couldn't you have brought them both up and say you grabbed him in 2 of your leagues? Why?
I didn't want to brag of being overly savvy.
I now have Krug in all 3 of my leagues. Actually, I drafted him in 2 of them and now got him off of free agency in the one I'm in with you. So yeah, he's been great, enjoying that. And Verbata, dude, we called it. Like, we nailed this one. And also Hansel has been great lately, and like Max Domi is doing well. One guy who was doing well, but now I guess won't for a little while, is Anthony D'Angelo, because he's been sent down to the minors, which was kind of surprising. I think we just said last week how maybe he'll be able to stick around, and he was playing on the top power play. So that's kind of a bummer for people who got excited about him. Hopefully you didn't give too much up for him. But, you know, the nice news is that Michael Stone now becomes a lot more useful. He's been on the top power play in D'Angelo's absence in the past, and like when he was healthy scratch that one game, and now I assume he'll be back on the top power play. He has 3 assists in his last 2 games. He also had 7 blocks versus LA a couple of games ago. So definitely Michael Stone is a guy, you know, much better, I'd say, than Beauchemin. If like Stone is available, he's a guy who can get you the blocks and also a decent number of points on that top power play with good players. Like, you might think, why do I care about top power play in Arizona? But Verbata, Hansel, Domi, and Oliver Ekman-Larsson are great people to be with on the power play. Forget about the rest of the team and how shallow they are. Like, they're good with that number 1 line for sure.
They sure are. I thought you were actually going to call me out on bringing up Verbata again, because I feel like we've done it every other week so far this year. As for D'Angelo, it's interesting that he was sent down after being kept up for so long, and then I didn't see any indication aside from sitting, of course, but no like comments in the press or anything that might have indicated why he's getting sent down. You mentioned Michael Stone being someone who might get opportunity. And of course, I'll mention Alex Goligoski could also see some more opportunity. He's actually averaging more power play time on ice per game so far than Michael Stone, but we'll see how that whole situation plays out.
Okay, and then one more cold streak, though maybe it's not really the case anymore. I was going to bring up a couple of Montreal guys at the request of DJ Zhang, who pleaded with us for a shout out. So DJ Zhang, he said, can you give a shout out to me and my boys, the BH? So here it is to the BH, Michael Perfecto. You gave me a bunch of names. Also, it's pretty funny. You sent an email asking for us to send you our music so you could play it during your annual Blades of Steel tournament. So I hope that went well. And yeah, I'm glad you're enjoying the show. Okay. The Montreal Canadiens, you asked us to talk about some of them. I wanted to ask what's up with Max Pacioretty. He has only 15 points in 24 games, which is a 51-point pace. But of course, that was before today's game. And Pacioretty had 2 goals and assists today. So I feel like if you were about to say that I think a turnaround is coming, it probably already has begun. A guy who I'm more concerned about is Brendan Gallagher, who only has 13 points in 24 games. And he actually had a power play assist today, but he's been pretty disappointing. Also like low ice time, and he's not on the top power play. I kind of thought he could be like a 55, 60 point guy, but right now he's been like closer to a 50 point guy. Is it buy low time with Brendan Gallagher, or did I have like unreasonable expectations for him? And by the way, I'll mention, speaking of Montreal, looks like Alex Galchenyuk got injured today, which really sucks because he's been so great. We don't know yet how long it'll be, so maybe let's not speculate about that. But tell me about Gallagher. I'm assuming you're going to say that Pacioretty is awesome, so let's focus on Gallagher.
Yeah, Pacioretty's awesome. Gallagher's still pretty good. He's still averaging almost 4 shots a game, which is incredible, and there's fantasy value right there that's worth waiting out a 50-point season if it happens. I still think he's going to do better than that, though. I can see him cracking 55 for sure, and depending on his line mates. I mean, it's just hard right now if you're not playing with Galchenyuk. Plekanec and Desharnais have not been very good for most of the season. Now that Galchenyuk's injured, maybe temporarily, I don't know. We won't get too into that. We'll address that next week if anything comes of this injury news that just came down the pipeline today. One thing Gallagher and Pacioretty both share in common, though, is that their numbers at even strength look very similar, but both have dramatic drop-offs in their own personal shot generation on the power play, and that is because Shea Weber is the one who shoots on the power play, as we've talked about in previous episodes. It's really eating into the rest of his team's opportunities to collect power play points. Brendan Gallagher, just 1 going into tonight's game. I think Pacioretty had 2 going into tonight's game. Both are off the paces that they set last year. I think Pacioretty had like 17 last year and Gallagher had 10.
Yeah, and obviously another big difference is that Radulov is on the team, which I guess has bumped Gallagher from the top power play a lot. He's having an amazing season. I'm seeing now he's day-to-day, according to ESPN. So I don't even know what's going on with Montreal.
He was day-to-day because he got like a stick in the face, and then he got stitched up, and then he went day-to-day before the game even ended on Yahoo, or as far as I thought I noticed. I think he played today, though. So I don't know why he's still day-to-day, but he seems pretty healthy and able to play.
Okay, so there's the Montreal Canadiens rundown. I hope you enjoyed it, DJ Zhang. Brian, I'm good. Are you good?
Almost. Let's just go back to Florida for a brief moment. Vincent Trocheck, 5-game pointless drought. Raleigh Smith, also snoozing right now, 4 goals, 4 assists in 25 games, and he's actually seeing more ice than last year. I imagine he could get back up to a 50-point pace, but I don't think there's any need to hold him in the meantime, especially with so many other Panthers struggling and perhaps being on the waiver wire like Jokinen and Yager. So that line of Trocheck, Jokinen, and Smith from last year, nobody's really clicking at the moment, although Trocheck has had his moments earlier this year, but at the moment, 5 games at a point. And then Elon, I teased this before, the guy on the first unit in Columbus who maybe should get bumped down to the second for Brandon Saad or Boone Jenner, Sam Gagner. He has 2 goals, 3 assists for 5 points on the power play so far this year, but he has a and he's had a 13-game run where he had 7 goals and 5 assists for 12 points. So 12 points in 13 games, that's amazing. But now he has just 1 goal in his last 6 games and is still due regression. If you picked him up during that run, congratulations. I hope you got a lot out of him, but it might be time to make sure you're not snoozing on him for much longer.
Yeah, I guess you couldn't have expected too much from Sam Gagner. It was nice while it lasted. Maybe it'll still be, maybe he'll still be able to put up a few more points if he's on that top power play and getting a decent deployment. Brian, Johnny Gaudreau, he's back. Like I said, he scored a so long that we've gone into this Calgary-Anaheim game, and Johnny Gaudreau has scored on Jonathan Bernier, who is playing instead of Gibson. But I guess the fact that this game has started probably means that it's time for us to end the show. Thank you, everyone, for joining us here in the chat room. Thank you so much for listening to our podcast. We really appreciate it. If you like the show, let us know. Tweet us at Keeping Karlsson. You can also ask us your fantasy hockey questions on Twitter. By the way, if you have a fantasy hockey question for us on Twitter, we need sometimes some context, right? Like if it's a 2-for-1 trade, I kind of need to know what the full roster implications are. Like if you're getting 2 and giving up 1, that means you're going to drop someone. So it'd be useful to know who that would be. If you're talking about like a forward for a goalie trade, it's useful to know who your other goalies are, who are the goalies in free agency, so I could get a sense of what the value of goalies are in your league. So, there's a lot of context needed to give good advice. I just wanted to throw that out there, but feel free to tweet at us for all of your fantasy hockey advice questions. Brian and I are happy to try to help out. If you really want to help support the show, you can give us a 5-star review on iTunes. If you really, really want to support the show, why not sign up to become a patron of Keeping Karlsson? Only $5 a month gets you access to our patron-only Facebook group, our monthly patron casts. Plus, you help support this show, which hopefully you think is worth it. You could give us a beer once a month for one of us, like I've said. So it's not very much. People in the chat room, people in the patron group have been asking if maybe Brian and I have a drinking problem, because I guess it adds up to quite a few beers. But, help us out. It would be nice. That's all I've got, Brian. So why don't we cue the outro music, and why don't you go ahead and read us the credits?
All right, this episode of the Keeping Karlsson Fantasy Hockey Podcast was presented by Dobra Hockey and supported by our patrons. Hang on, I wasn't prepared. I'm getting prepared.
Take your time. I'm going to go grab the dog who is asking for some attention.
Classic Cody. It's coming.
All right, Cody, say hi.
Oh, it's just not working. The sort.
So
function.
whatever. So say their names next week. Nope. Only DJ Zan cares if you say his name.
Okay.
Said supported by our patrons,
including Mark B and Avi R. Thanks so much for supporting the show. It was researched with help from Dobra Hockey, Frozen Pool, Corsica.hockey, Hockey Analysis, Hockey Reference, Hockey Database, Elite Prospects, Roto World, and Fantrax.
Great job as always, Brian. Thanks again for everyone listening, and we'll catch you all with another live episode next week.
Until then, keep on keeping Karlsson.
Woo! What do you got? You're saying more dog. I don't know what else to do with her. Give more dog.
Closer to the camera.
I think I'm freaking her out. Cody, say hi to the watchers. Oh. Okay. Thanks, everyone. I gotta walk her, edit this show, so I better go. This was a lot of fun.
Thanks, everyone, for joining us. See you next week.
Bye.